Right, so here's who we have with us for our discussion tonight. Let's start off with Edwin Sifuna, who's an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for joining us. Thanks. Martin Olo, who's also an advocate and political analyst, and Koigi Wamwere, who many would remember is, shall we say, a Saba veteran, and who is the best placed person who was there then and to tell us whether that situation persists today and to just give us some perspective and some history on this. And I'll start with you, Koigi. Does the situation now warrant the calls for Saba? A lot of parallels are being drawn between now and then. Court is saying Saba is the big day that's coming up, even declaring it a national holiday. You were there in 1990. Is the situation the same now as it was then?
I think one can say that in some respects, some things have stayed the same. But there is no doubt that the situation is not comparable with the situation that we had then, because at the time when we had Saba, the opposition had just been disallowed from having its rally at Kamkunji. We didn't have more than one party; it was just one party dictatorship. Many people had been locked up already. And clearly, we were struggling against a one-party dictatorship that was cruel and determined to keep power at whatever cost. On the other hand, we understood clearly that what we needed for our salvation was democratic rights, was democracy that we could use for purposes of changing the system, changing the leadership, and moving the country forward. Today, you would say that although we have quite a lot of shortcomings, we are not where we were then. The opposition can be in the media. We can be where we are now. At that time, it was not possible. You can have somebody appear on page 1 in the newspaper with a bigger picture than the president. In those days, it would not have been possible. You could have as big rallies as we are seeing all over the country without the police interfering or trying to stop them.
And so the question is, do you think they're misusing the Saba magic and feeling and momentum?
That's what I feel. But the trouble is, I don't know exactly what is the game plan for the opposition. Okay. We have been told that on that day, Raila will liberate us completely. How he is going to do it? What is he going to use to effect that liberation?
Edwin,
I think that we are abusing the occasion of Saba because it cannot possibly be used to resolve the problems that we have today.
Edwin, is there a game plan? As Koigi is saying, there doesn't seem to be one.
Well, Yvonne, first let me say that it is quite an honor for me to meet Honorable Koigi and to tell him personally that he is a hero of mine, that we enjoy the freedoms that we do because of the struggle that people and him have put into this country. But I'm sure he will understand my confusion when on this day he is telling the country that the methods or apparatus that were available then to be able to effect change ended with their generation, as if when we were agitating for the second liberation of the country, we had a social contract that said that protests and any other form of mass action is restricted only to the movement that the generation of Koigi was involved in. Because I do not think that we have any contract in this country that says that certain modes of effecting change were only available to Koigi's generation and only then for the purposes of sourcing a new constitution. And if that were the case, Yvonne, once we got this new constitution, then the constitution would have provided that, yes, this is the path that we took to get here. But now that we are here, these forms of protest and all these other forms of agitation are no longer needed in the country. But the constitution has those provisions. In fact, in Koigi's era, it was not a constitutional right for you to protest. Right now, under Article 37, it is actually the constitution that gives every Kenyan the right to protest, the right to assemble peacefully and unarmed, the right to associate. And this is what the opposition is calling for on Sabasaba.
Understood. What is the game plan come July the 7th?
Well, according to what the Honorable Raila Odinga has said, is that the people are supreme. And on Sabasaba, whatever it is the people decide to do, it is not for me to second guess. Because you will see that the Constitution, the very first article of the Constitution, recognizes that the supreme power in this country is the people. And if they decide to exercise their sovereignty, they can do it directly on that day or through the elected representatives. So it is not for us to sit here and say what the people will do.
Can I?
Yes. Very quickly, and then we bring in Martin.
I would just say that, of course you are right, that whatever methods that were used then, some could still apply today. But there are also some methods that were used then that would not be fair to try and replicate today. For instance, some of us were driven into exile.
Yes.
I don't think that today the need for exile is what it was.
But that was the government
days.
Doing that. It wasn't the
correct,
people.
Correct. There are some people who have called for mass action.
Yes.
Raila himself has said we don't need to stick to the constitution or to the laws because the people are sovereign. And yes, they are. But supposing people decide to go fighting, supposing they decided to apply violence, what will the leadership do? Try and stop the people, guide them in order to make sure that their action results in something positive? Or do we just take refuge in the fact that the people are sovereign and let them go killing one another in the street? Already we have had 2007, 2008 experience of electoral violence.
Okay.
Yes. Do we really want a repeat of this?
I'd like to bring in
Martin.
Martin.
This is the question that I'm asking.
I'd like to bring in Martin Olo right now. People saying that he should actually follow the legitimate means, but some say if he was to go through parliament, there's already this now infamous phrase, the tyranny of numbers, and that Raila seems to have, refused to accept the election outcome and the Supreme Court result. Is this a means to getting power, or do Kenyans have valid concerns that need to be addressed in this way?
I think that we are living in interesting times, and again, let me put it in perspective. I was reminding Honorable Koigi that the first time I met him was 1982, and it was in Kakamega, and he had come to address us as students that time, and that time he was considered a very big rebel, and before, when we had gathered to listen to him, 2 lorries of Askaris came and dispersed him. Now that is, I think, a perfect place to begin, that we've come a long way. We've agitated for a more enabling constitution, and now we have one constitution, my learned friend Edwin. And the one thing that we do not want to do is to mislead Kenyans. I've seen CORD use the term sovereignty fairly liberally, as if the constitution itself does not actually define a sovereignty and proceeds to donate that sovereignty to the judiciary, to the legislature, and to the executive. And the executive are 2 levels, at the national level and at the county level. So when you talk about the sovereignty of the people of this country, there is ways in which the constitution has anticipated how that sovereignty is going to be used and has actually expressed itself, and we've seen it happen. When elections were held in 2013, the people were expressing themselves. Now, when they put in this government, the people made a commitment that they needed to live with this government, knowing very well that it would be 5 years. Now, whether the times are difficult, and I'm not saying they're not, they are difficult. Whether insecurity is high, and we all agree it's high, there is no enough reason to argue that this government must go. That argument, in terms of constitutional terms, can only be made according to how the Constitution stipulates it. And therefore, for anybody to come up at this stage and begin to say that by the time we get to Sabasaba, we will not know what will happen.
Yvonne, I think one thing I need to correct my learned friend. It is not the Constitution that donates these powers to the judiciary or to the executive.
I said sovereignty is donated.
It's not donated by the Constitution. It's not by the Constitution, it's by the people. It is the people who donate these powers. They exercise this power on our behalf.
The only instrument we have where we have everything defined as a lawyer is in the Constitution. Do not tell me anything else in the streets.
No, that is precisely what I'm going to rely on. The very first article of the Constitution recognizes that the sovereignty exists and it resides in the people, and that they might exercise the sovereignty directly or through their elected representative. That presupposes that there will be a time when we have the people and their elected representatives, and we can choose to ignore our elected representatives and exercise that.
Then we are being told
directly.
that they are preparing us for anarchy.
No. That is not what code is saying. That is what the Constitution says.
I think we should.
One thing I need to clarify.
Okay.
The leadership has been very clear that they recognize that the Jubilee coalition has a 5-year contract with people. Raila Odinga himself has been very clear on that.
So this is not about ascending to power.
Nobody is saying we need to overturn the country. In fact, he was very clear in saying, if you want to overthrow a government, you don't call them for dialogue. What he has said is that people need to sit down, and there are problems that have been identified. There is nothing wrong with sitting down and talking.
No, but let me say this. Actually, I wish, because I'm a supporter of dialogue, I wish I could believe that this, what is being called for by code, is a genuine national dialogue. In my view, it's not national, because you can see the only party code wants to talk to is first and foremost Jubilee.
That is not true.
What they are going to talk about, I get the feeling that even the so-called dialogue, there will be no dialogue. I think what code intends to do is to get President Uhuru and his deputy and read to them the surrender terms. Tell them we want government and we want you to surrender on these terms.
I just have a question for you. Wasn't that the kind of suspicion that you guys were treated
No. Let me add something. You know, when we say that any means is fair in seeking change, we are saying that we approve the kind of revolutions we have seen, called Spring Revolution.
The Arab Spring.
The Arab Spring.
Okay.
Which have ended up in total destruction of countries like Libya, Iraq, Cote d'Ivoire.
And nobody has called for that.
No.
Nobody has called for that.
You know, Yvonne,
what you are doing,
Yvonne, will have to get this right.
One at a moment.
What I'm saying,
okay, Koigi, conclude and then we can move on.
what I'm saying is that even sovereignty of the people has limits. If we decided to execute genocide, the whole world will rally against us, because it is not right that you use that sovereignty. No. We are not fear. It is not because
you used to say that is what you intend to do when you are agitating for
the problem is, you know now, let me chip in those terms.
Let me chip in.
Anything that the opposition wants to do, they are free to come to a front like this.
You know, this
express
I'm surprised that this discussion is coming from Edwin and maybe Code. We've had the whole argument around the ICC hinged by African leaders, led by Museveni and others, on the issue of sovereignty. Now we are hearing that you can come in the name of sovereignty and cause mayhem.
Okay. All right, let's move the discussion forward, gentlemen. Could Jubilee's resistance to having national dialogue have precipitated a situation such as we find ourselves in? We've had the back and forth, the deputy president saying, no, we will not dialogue. The president says, yes, we will. And then he meets the MPs and says, no, we will not. And then there are conditions. Then you can come for a cup of tea. Do you think that might have precipitated the situation we find ourselves in today, Edwin?
Yes, I think that is why we are where we are today, because the problem is this, Yvonne. Even this sovereignty that we are talking about, we are talking about exercising that sovereignty as far as providing solutions to the problem that Kenyans are facing. We're not talking about overthrowing a government. We're not talking about any other agenda. We are saying that people as a sovereign can sit down and find solutions to problems that they face.
Edwin,
and the issues have been identified.
Let me rephrase this statement, or quote the statement that was made today by Jacoyo Mediwo. Uhuru must agree to talk. He must. And if he will not agree to talk, we shall force him to agree to talk. Do you see a statement like that as sounding a little bit
well, first of all,
radical and revolutionary?
I of course would not agree with the terms that Jacoyo would use. But I want you to listen to the leadership of a party. He has said himself... He
is part of the leadership of the party.
No, I'm talking about the top leadership of the party. If we go to listen to what the lieutenants on the Jubilee side also say, the likes of Kabando, we are not going to get into that. We are saying what has the leadership of the code called for. They have identified 5 issues that they think are important to Kenyans, and they're saying let Kenyans sit down and talk. They're not talking about talking to Jubilee alone. They've said they want members of the civil society to sit down. They want representatives of what they call labor unions to sit down and talk, because solutions are not the preserve of one coalition or the other.
All right, I'd like to throw in this one, even as we continue. I know you've said some issues are different or similar to what happened in 1990. Governors of Kiambu, like Kipia and Murang'a, have said CORD is not welcome in their counties. For those that will remember their history, this reminds us of what happened with Bishop Alexander Muge when he was told not to go into Busia. He went in, had a triumphant, welcoming, and we all know what happened when he left Busia. He was told, if you come in, you will not leave here alive, and that is indeed what happened. Theories and speculation still continue, but that is believed to have been a work of ill motive. Koigi, do you think then that when we hear statements like these from governors saying, no, you are not welcome here, that is essentially the same thing as was happening in 1990, that some parts of this country are still unwelcome to certain conversations?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that, and it's very unfortunate that anybody would want to stop CORD from holding their meetings wherever they wish to. But when we come to the question of national dialogue, in my view, the way the dialogue is being called for is in such a way that it looks like, first of all, the core is not genuine, and what is intended is to provoke the other side to say no to the dialogue. Because it's not difficult to be respectful when you are calling other people for dialogue. But when you say that if the president doesn't come for this dialogue, we are going to shave him without water. You know, you are talking about probably putting him in prison. That's where people are shaved without water and have been shaved without water. And I think that this kind of language, instead of assisting what is being called for, and I'm for dialogue, because I know without dialogue you can only have war. But when you call people to a dialogue in an insulting manner, what you are actually telling, and we are not nincompoops, we are not idiots. We can tell a language that is meant to help bring about something, and a language whose purpose is precisely to stop that thing happening. The way it looks to me is that the CORD have settled on an agenda of power, and getting that power now and by whatever means necessary. That is what we are deducing. If CORD thinks something different, let them come on platform and say it.
And you know, Yvonne, I still stand for the law, I still stand for constitution. If CORD wants power, if CORD believes there are issues that need to be dealt with, then they have their manifesto to go back to, and they know Jubilee has a manifesto to go back to. Now, if they want these things solved now, then they also understand that the only mechanisms that are there are spelled out in the Constitution. But want to argue that it doesn't matter, the Constitution does not matter. The sovereignty of the people is not given. It's everything. But that it is sure anarchy. And let us be frank, and today we are speaking on this date, if we want to see this country really go up in smoke, let's say so. But those of us who are for the law and the Constitution are saying that if you want power, there are mechanisms set out.
All right. Allow me to play the devil's advocate for just one moment, because in 1990, that was the law and that was the Constitution, which persons like yourself
fought very hard against.
Yes, fought very hard against. Could that not be the same thing
it is
that CORD is fighting for now,
but the
and saying that they do not agree with the Constitution as it is?
The Constitution as it is gives them the freedom to do everything they need to do to effect change in this country. The laws that we have, in addition to the Constitution, also will permit them to bring about change without necessarily resorting to violent means. And let me say this. Look at the fact that we have a free media, which allows us to sit here, disagree, and even charge the government with anything we want. We have a parliament where CORD is very well represented. We have a Senate. We have political parties.
Okay.
Do we need to go to the street?
The question I'm asking is,
does CORD
need to grow in this? The same side has actually sent a petition to Parliament asking for the disbandment of IBC.
Absolutely.
And the same party wants to say that let us
But Yvonne, you see,
Edwin, let's have you in.
A clear and obvious misunderstanding of the Constitution. I don't know how many times I need to repeat that the constitution presupposes and anticipates a situation whereby you can do that directly or through your elected representative. It is there. And the problem that I have, that is Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya. That is what it says.
That you can oust the constitution.
No, it doesn't say you oust.
How does it say that you can go directly?
It says the sovereignty of the people can be exercised directly.
This is now
even more important. You have a copy of the Constitution. You can read it.
I cannot sit here and hear you misleading Kenyans.
Okay.
The
Martin, let him finish his point.
When you talk about sovereignty, please.
Yes.
Let us not talk about what is this direct?
All right, Martin, let's let him finish the point.
What is
in black and white.
But what's direct?
It says that the people have the option of exercising their sovereignty either directly or through their elected representatives. So that instead of sending my elected member of parliament to go and speak to an issue on my behalf, I can actually decide to come to a rally and speak it myself. That is what the Constitution
but also
says.
When we bring in Sabasaba,
Sabasaba,
there is also something else that we are saying. That we can ignore the people's representatives and invite the people to go and fight for whatever.
Nobody has said that. Nobody has said that.
Nobody has said that.
Gentlemen, I think we need us to move from this point. And here's a tweet that's coming in from Joel Opondo, who says, what were the major reasons for Sabasaba? Have all those reasons been solved? If so, then it is a misuse. If not, do you think everything that we fought for during Sabasaba, and we'll come to you, Koigi, in a moment, Edwin, everything that we fought for, has that come to pass?
I do not think that everything that we fought for has come to pass, because people fought for an open and democratic society.
You don't think that exists?
I do not think that we've gotten there yet.
Explain.
Because we will never get to a perfect society. We are always aspiring, and even the constitution that we have is an aspirational constitution, that we want to see ourselves in a certain place at a certain time. If you look at the things that are happening now, why would you say that we live in an open and democratic society when we have people who actually fought for the rights that we have in the Constitution, telling us that we should not exercise those rights? That when you call for a rally, somebody says you are raising political temperatures.
Okay. Allow me to ask a very quick question, even as we carry on. Sorry, they talked about this being a consultative forum.
Yes.
In what way is it consultative? Perhaps it's what's happening behind the scenes, but just educate us, because they go up to the podium and they speak, and of course they rally the crowds and the crowds say yes. In what way is this consultative to the point that we're seeing feedback that's being...
well, the way that I understood is this, that it is becoming increasingly clear that the government is not willing to have this particular dialogue. And you see, the beauty with dialogue is that you can't force somebody to sit down with you and talk. But the fact that Yvonne does not show up to the dialogue does not mean that we as a country cannot talk amongst ourselves. So the consultative
forum... But is it talking
forum,
amongst ourselves, or is it politicians addressing masses?
No. Actually, if you saw the report on Tononoka, there were actually views that were presented by Wananchi themselves. People were given an opportunity to speak to their leaders as to what they think their problems are. And the end result is supposed to be a collation of all these issues, and then at the proposed national dialogue, all of these issues will be brought to the table, because we can't have it.
You know, Yvonne, if we go on the way we're going, what we are simply saying is this, and I like the way Edwin is saying that only code people can exercise sovereignty. In other words,
no, I did not
just
say
a minute.
that.
Just learn to listen also.
Council, I did not say that.
Listen, now I'm coming to you. You haven't made the point. So next time I also raise my people and start arguing and having rallies, those are people. Next time TNA are going to raise people and those are people. So who is going to be an umpire? Where is going to be?
Well, there have been so many proposed umpire. Even my brother Musalia Mudavadi offered to umpire.
Let us come to reality, and we haven't seen anarchy that we are advocating for. I have argued on various forums that where you talk about national dialogue presupposes you have a constitutional crisis. Where you're talking about national dialogue and you're talking about a conference presupposes that you have a military crisis, presupposes that you have a political crisis. Now, constitutional political crisis. If you want to look around, look at South Sudan. Okay. It's there.
All right.
And people are out in the bush.
Can I say something?
We are not there.
Yes, very quickly as we start to conclude.
I will say that there is no doubt that everything that was sought at the time of Sabasaba is not achieved. But it's also true that we have parties that we didn't have then. It is true that we don't have a dictatorship that is as bad as we had then. It's true that we have freedom of association, we have freedom of assembly, we have a free media, we have many more means of changing government that we didn't have then. To that extent, even if we are not in Canaan yet, we are closer to River Jordan than we were then. And if we use the wrong means, say inviting people to the streets, which Sabasaba did because it was desperate, and mass action resort, of course, whatever mass action.
So what is the threshold? What is the threshold for inviting people to the street? What is the threshold?
You should not invite people to the streets as long as people can have peaceful rallies, as long as people can have demonstrations that are peaceful, as long as you can meet at a media house as we have met now, as long as you are
Isn't
in
that
parliament.
What's happening at the moment?
That is precisely
these are things that we have now, and that's why we are saying, actually trying to ask people to go to the streets, which is why Sabasaba is being invoked. It's irresponsible because you are trying to get people to use means that are not absolutely necessary today.
We're running out of time, so I'd like you, Martin, to have your final comments, and then Edwin, as we close.
I think basically what I would like to tell Kenyans is that what we are being entertained on is sure recipe for anarchy. I don't agree that the issue of sovereignty allows us to whip up emotions and then go out on the streets. Because if CORD can do that, let us grant it that even the other side will do that.
And that's exactly what
CORD will be no
is saying
umpire,
on Twitter,
and there will be nobody to hold us to account. We don't want the institutions we have created in the Constitution. We are saying that the judiciary is, we're saying parliament is, this is the surest way that I've seen where people who fought for this constitution actually are violating the constitution and are saying whatever they are saying and want to get away with it. So my point would be that we have a country, and the country belongs to all of us, Kenyans, and that we also have a responsibility. If anybody wants power, we do have an opportunity to go through the motions, and when we've done it, we accept it.
Very quickly. Edwin, as a
Well, for me, I want people to understand this, that the problems that precipitated the call for national dialogue are not problems for CORD. It is not as if the tax in CORD strongholds is 30% and the other regions is 12%. It is not as if when somebody throws a grenade in Gikomba, he uses a list that only targets CORD members. It's not as if corruption only affects the people who come from CORD strongholds. And the call was that let us sit, because we are seeing that this is something that we need to come together as a country and say, what are the issues? What are the ways that we can go about addressing some of these concerns? And that is all.
Okay, we have to leave it at that for now. I'm sorry we're running out of time, gentlemen.
I would say just something very briefly.
30 seconds, if you must.
3 things. One, I don't believe that CORD has another agenda for the national dialogue except power. But the way they want that power is not through the proper procedure or even... the other thing is, Uhuru is in the house that we want to get into. And while we are entitled to try and get into that house where Uhuru is, we do not need to burn the house.
Okay, I think we need to leave it at that for now.
Keep the house intact.
Thank you very much. We need to leave it at that for now. I do need to thank my guests for coming, and also to recognize the effort that Member of Parliament for Kiminini made. We know he left Mombasa really late and was not able to be part of our panel tonight, but we thank him for making the effort. You cannot see him, he's behind my cameras right now, but we thank him for making the time and as much as possible to make it here, and maybe we'll make a point of having him at some point in the course of the week. Thanks for watching. We will carry on with your feedback as we continue with our bulletin, taking a short break now. This has been Checkpoint, back after this break.